The ascendance of San Jose is sort of fascinating to watch. It's topped the list of most expensive cities, most desirable real estate, and it's really been an interesting evolution. So I previously interviewed Erik Hayden, who's the founder of Urban Catalyst, which is an opportunity zone fund based exclusively in downtown San Jose. And I was impressed not just by his experience, but also his sort of love of the city. So I wanted to circle back, see how the city's emerging from the pandemic and what's next. A little bit about Erik. He's responsible for developing more than $3.5 billion in real estate projects, including over 2,300 residential units in the California Bay Area. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk about something that's happening in California right now that I find fascinating, which is Governor Newsom signed a couple of new bills that impact statewide zoning. We talked about it on the Millionacres website. Can you explain what the bills are and what they may mean for California?
Sure. So these two bills, are added to a long list of bills that are meant to address our housing crisis here in California. Overall, maybe 10 or 15 bills have made it through that have actually had an impact. These two most recent ones, SB 9 and SB 10, Governor Newsom signed into law. One allows for up to 4 units on a single family lot. So really changing the single family designation, which is really prevalent throughout California, to allow for a higher density development type. SB 10 it allowed you to do 10 units per lot near a major transit station. I really don't anticipate that either of these bills is going to have a major impact on solving our housing crisis. It's really just chipping away at it and, taking away control from local land use authority, which people have a lot of opinions on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Interesting. So this actually might not do some of the things that people hope it will do.
Well, I can tell you here in Silicon Valley, our housing crisis is really acute. We have to build something like 150,000 housing units here in Silicon Valley if we wanted to have supply equal demand. And we've never built more than 5,000 housing units in a single year. So it's almost like we're never going to get there, and just changing a single family designation to allow you to put a couple of additional lots on it, it's not going to make a major impact.
Interesting. And I know there's also a fund involved too. I believe it's a $1.75 billion housing affordability fund. Do you think that will make a difference?
There's a lot of housing affordability funds out there. A couple notable ones has been Google's pledge of $1 billion, Facebook pledged $1 billion, Apple pledged $2 billion. Really just drops in the bucket. We need a comprehensive way to fund below market rate housing if that's the way that we choose to solve this housing crisis. People tend to focus a lot on below market rate housing as the solution, but it really is just a housing issue overall. We need houses of all different types, not just below market rate. Sometimes I talk about, when we talk about below market rate housing and what we're doing right now, it's just we're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
That is accurate, but painful. And certainly, I think I've always thought that California is often, as California goes, so goes the country. So it's been interesting to watch the state kind of try to wrestle with some of these major issues, and it doesn't seem like developers in general are really reacting to it too much yet. So time will tell.
Developers do what they think they can do to be successful, and the state, in the local jurisdictions, they try to set up ways in which they want cities to grow. And developers will fill in where it makes sense for them. So it's really up to the local governments to change the rules in a way that creates a significant amount of new housing at all levels.
Well, I think the impact of the local government is, you're absolutely right, is very important. And let's talk a little bit about that when it comes to San Jose, because the city's coming out of the pandemic. We're all coming out of the pandemic. The city launched vaccine requirements at large events, and so hopefully that will make people feel safe to go. But how do you feel the city has responded overall? And are you seeing people actually be interested in kind of going back to the new normal?
It's interesting here in Santa Clara County. We have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country, and we have one of the lowest COVID rates in the country. It's interesting, or maybe not surprising, that those two things kind of coincide. The government has taken steps to make people safe. Our Our steps are a little bit more stringent than most other places in the country, but what we can see is that what we're doing is working. And people going back out to events, yeah, we're seeing lots of people out at events. Whether it's, my children going to soccer games or, children's musical theater or going to a 49ers football game. People are out and about.
And what about office work? You're back in the office. Are you seeing that across San Jose and Silicon Valley in general, that people are slowly returning back to the office?
Right now, I just read the statistics. About 30% of people are back in the office, with most of the major companies delaying their reopening into next year. And they were unsure of what was going to happen with the Delta variant, and they're just keeping it safe. And so, I applaud them for their, thoughts. When they're ready to come back into the office, it's going to be a return to the office that's somewhat unprecedented, mainly because Silicon Valley companies have done fantastic during the pandemic, and they've been on a hiring spree. And they're at the point now where they've hired so many people, in a lot of cases, they don't even have enough office space to have people come back, whether or not it's in a hybrid work format or not.
That's really fascinating, especially considering things like, I know Google just did a big deal in New York City. So you see a lot of these tech companies that they're offering that freedom, but they're also still investing in a lot of space all around the country.
Absolutely. It's interesting here at Urban Catalyst, as an opportunity zone fund, we talk to a lot of direct investors, and a lot of our investors, work at these major companies. And we had the most fascinating conversation with someone from Netflix recently. In our fund, we have a large office building we're building. And he said, I'm concerned about office. Netflix just told me that I'm going to be working from home for the near future. And they sent me a box with all of my stuff in it from my desk. And I'm worried that maybe they're subleasing space. I don't know what's going on. So I called one of my friends who's in HR at Netflix, and he said, yeah, no, we are forcing people to work from home, but we're not subleasing space. Our issue is we've hired so many people that we can't bring everyone back when we plan to return. And so we've identified folks that we think can successfully work from home, and we're going to force them to work from home until we can figure out this office space issue. And that's been pretty common with a lot of the investors we've talked to.
Interesting, because I know the CEO of Netflix has been very outspoken about not wanting people to work from home, and that the offices kind of has values that can't be replaced. So that's an interesting one. What do you think? What advantages do you think San Jose has because it's so important to tech companies?
San Jose really has two major advantages for tech companies, maybe three. The first is San Jose traditionally has been a bedroom community. We're the 10th largest city in America, but 90% of our city is single family homes. If Palo Alto and Mountain View are like the center of the Silicon Valley universe, they're 15 miles away from downtown San Jose, but in traffic, that can take an hour to an hour and a half. So having office space located closer to where their employees actually live, because it's more affordable here in San Jose. And it's kind of funny to say that because our median home price is $1.3 million, but in Palo Alto, it's $2.5 million. So it's closer where people live. The next is it's hard to get large chunks of space throughout Silicon Valley. We don't have a very high vacancy rate. So in downtown San Jose, with the ability to build new office buildings, we have the ability to create more space as these companies continue to expand. And then the final reason really is a price point thing. If triple net on a price per square foot per month in Palo Alto, you're looking at like $10. Here in San Jose, it's $5.50. It's almost half of what Palo Alto is. So you can get less expensive office space, you can get it closer to your employees, and you can get the amount of space that you need.
What other industries are driving growth in San Jose, and are they fighting with these monster tech companies to get space?
So everyone is fighting with the monster tech companies to get space, but I will say, I'm going to lean in and say the tech industry is the industry here in Silicon Valley. Most of the other industries have left. We don't have a significant manufacturing industry anymore. The second largest industry is really local government, people that work at the county, work in the cities. So it's all tech all day long. And one thing to remember about the tech industry, it's a lot different than it was, during the .com crash where, you had pets.com. Silicon Valley is now home to 3 of the 5 largest companies in the country with Facebook, Apple, and Google. And the other 2, Microsoft and Amazon, have a big office presence here. And they have a significant amount of office space, but we also have just as many startups, if not more, than we've ever had before. We had more companies go public this year than we've had in any year, going all the way back to the .com. We created something like 59 new unicorns in Silicon Valley this year. So while we now have this establishment of these giant tech companies, we also still have that small startup mentality where venture funding is pouring into the area and the universities are cranking out engineers. And, that's the life of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and SPAC fever has certainly accelerated that as well, given everybody a new path to go public faster.
Absolutely.
You operate in downtown San Jose, but are there neighborhoods within that? Are there sections of it? And what does the surrounding area look like in terms of investing?
Sure. So, downtown San Jose geographically is really giant. It's kind of like the city of Phoenix. It's very spread out. So there's a bunch of different neighborhoods. We're focused in the downtown core because downtown San Jose really is the only true urban environment in Silicon Valley. And we have the Diridon train station, which is slated to be the largest train station on the West Coast, and BART, which is the largest mass transportation system here in the Bay Area. It's now funded to come through downtown San Jose and connect into Diridon Station. We kind of say about time. It's been only 62 years before San Francisco connects to San Jose with BART. But the surrounding neighborhoods around downtown are primarily single-family neighborhoods. Almost most of San Jose is single-family neighborhoods. Some notable ones, the Rose Garden, Willow Glen, Nagley Park, the Delmas neighborhood. These are just fantastic neighborhoods. They primarily were formed when Silicon Valley was called the Valley of Heart's Delight, because we had so many orchards that in the spring, all the orchards would flower, and it was just so beautiful that's how it got its name. But the major industry at the turn of the century was the canning industry, and so all of these neighborhoods around downtown San Jose grew up for housing for workers to support the canning industry.
Interesting. So I wanted to talk a bit, because when I was researching San Jose, I saw that the city has this general plan that was adopted in 2011. It looks like it's kind of a guiding force for the city, but a lot has changed in 10 years. How is that plan adapting, and how are you thinking about that plan as a guiding force for your investment?
The general plan is everything in California. Every city about 30 years ago was required to adopt one, or they stopped getting state funding for transportation. And zoning laws are antiquated from the 40s and 50s, and so a general plan is that guiding document. San Jose started to redo their general plan, around 2005. And I remember because I went to a lot of the early planning meetings. The problem with San Jose's general plan is that it was adopted in 2011, but they said, we have 52 areas that we want to support high density development. And each of those areas is going to require its own plan. And they're going to come out in 3 horizons. And so far in the last 10 years, they've finalized 13 of the 52 horizons. Big article in the Mercury News a couple of weeks ago, what a failure the San Jose general plan has been, as in it has not spurred any additional housing development if it was there or if it wasn't there. And I tend to agree. The only thing that it really did that was fantastic was it designated downtown San Jose as every property in downtown was general plan, quote unquote, downtown, which allowed for anything. Because they want to see high density development. They don't want to make it a challenge to get your projects approved here. They want to streamline that process. California is notorious for having a really challenging environment for the pre-construction process. But in downtown San Jose, it's really the easiest of any city that I've seen in Northern California, which still means it's very challenging. It's just not impossible.
So the housing affordability is a challenge. What other challenges do you feel like the city is facing, given that it's expanding so rapidly and the population's growing?
The population only grows as fast as we build new housing, so it hasn't grown that quickly. In fact, Austin, Texas is going to take us over as the 10th largest city next year, which is kind of sad. I like being in the top 10. As far as challenges, COVID, everybody's facing that challenge, and San Jose is no different. We also, because of our housing prices, we've seen an increase in homelessness. Not to the extent that you see like in San Francisco, but it's still happening here. And our cities is recently, as of today, The state government and the local governments are combining for a big plan to build a significant number of new homeless housing units, converting older hotels and then building, smaller individual units. So we have that issue. The local governments are working to respond to that issue. The housing crisis, as far as, yes, it's expensive to live here, and yes, people deserve to be able to afford to live here. One of the side effects of that is that we create 6 jobs for every housing unit that we've built in Silicon Valley for the last 30 years. And our companies here can't grow fast enough. They can't get enough employees to actually live here to fill all of those applications, because it isn't that they can't afford to live here, it's just there isn't any houses. So a little bit of a side effect and a problem that San Jose has is we need more housing in 100 different ways. It's the only thing that really could put a damper on Silicon Valley's economy. It's the lack of employees.
Well, I heard that the city is also considering changing the parking requirements per building. What do you think of that, and how are you thinking about parking? I mean, obviously you've got tech there. If there's going to be autonomous cars, they're probably going to happen there before other places. What are you seeing right now?
So I love this question, because this is something that cities should have tackled, 15, 20 years ago. Here in the Valley, most cities, there's suburban cities, they have suburban parking requirements where it's like, okay, every housing unit needs 2 spaces. And when you build high density development near transit, you don't need that much. How much do you need? A lot of studies out there showing that, in urban environments, you should have around 0.9 spaces per unit. The city of San Jose in downtown wants to eliminate parking requirements altogether and just say it's at the discretion of the planning department. And I'm totally fine with that. What I want to do when I build my projects is I want to build enough parking to meet, what the demand is for my future tenants. And then that's it. So if they let me build 1 space per unit, I'm totally happy with that. As far as how we build our parking structures, we've thought about these autonomous cars in the future, and I'm not sure how many years out that is, but in some cases we do design our parking garages, especially here in San Jose, we build above ground parking, that eventually you convert those parking areas into other uses in the future if parking becomes, obsolete.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's kind of exciting is the idea of parking maybe not becoming obsolete right away, but needing less parking because it opens up so much infill opportunity. Is that something that you're kind of hoping happens over time?
I don't know if I hope for it. Building parking spots in my buildings makes it very expensive to build buildings. I mean, a typical above ground parking space, not including the cost of land, is $45,000 per space. So if I'm building 400 units and I need 400 parking spaces, that's a big chunk of change towards the development costs of my building. So reducing development costs obviously spurs development. So we like that. We like the synergy and the revitalization that's happening here downtown. Will it unlock urban development? I mean, urban development will be unlocked, based on a variety of factors: construction costs, market costs, city fees, the abilities and wants of cities to be able to process projects in a timely manner. There's a lot that goes into it. Parking is one of those issues, but probably not one of the bigger ones.
What are you seeing as far as supply chain issues? Is that impacting you at all?
It is impacting us in that we're having to plan, now months and almost years in advance to get certain items that go into our buildings. We understand what those issues are, and so we plan in advance for them. We're lucky that we weren't caught off guard, herd urban cattle. We just started construction on our first project last month, and we plan on starting 6 additional projects in the next 12 months. So we're right at the beginning of that process, which is great for us because we can plan for it. I mean, a couple of small examples I think that everybody's seeing in everyday life. My refrigerator, after 20 years, finally died. I ordered a new one. It'll be here March 11th.
Oh.
My pool in my backyard is green. It's been green for 2 weeks. I called the pool company and said, "Why is my pool green?" And they said, "Oh, well, we don't have the chemicals to put into your pool because of supply chain issues from China." And so you can see it's affecting developers, but it's affecting everybody. I mean, how many ships are there now anchored off Long Beach? Like 72 giant ships. I mean, it's the start and stop, and now we have so much coming in that we can't even process it. It'll untangle itself over time as we return to a more normalized society, but there'll be some interesting times here over probably the next 12 to 18 months.
I would agree with that. It definitely seems like we had thought that this was going to resolve itself within a year, and that is so not the case. And it's been fascinating to watch. It really does affect every aspect of building. Well, let's talk about a couple of your projects, because you're doing an extended stay hotel. I mean, wow, hospitality right now is a concern. I can understand why it makes sense for San Jose because so many business travelers come in. What are you feeling about hospitality?
Sure. I always like hospitality. I especially like extended stay business hotels. During the pandemic, that segment of the hotel market, it did better than most other segments. There's a really strong demand for it here in downtown based upon all the big companies that are down here. As an example for you, my partner Josh, he built an extended stay business hotel, another Marriott Town Place Suites in the city of Campbell, which is about 5 miles outside of downtown, a few years ago. And while it was under construction, Adobe, who has their headquarters in downtown San Jose, approached him to lease 100% of the rooms a year in advance, just for their employees.
Wow.
And I'm not going to say that's what's going to happen with ours, although our project is 3 blocks away from Adobe's world headquarters. But there definitely is strong demand, and it really doesn't hurt that it's 500 yards away from Google's future mega campus. They're planning on building out that campus over the next 10 years, and when it's completed, it'll be their largest campus on Earth with over 7 million square feet of office.
You talked before about office, and I'm thinking also one of the things I've been tracking is ground floor retail. Is that a concern in San Jose? It's been a concern in other areas where, especially like in New York, ground floor retail has just been terrible. What are you seeing as far as retail?
The retail, because of the pandemic, has just been hit extraordinarily hard. In downtown San Jose, we've seen retail, close up very similar to other major cities. It seems that the stronger retail survives, and whether that's national chains or just really well-run, small businesses, they seem to have survived, throughout the pandemic. And coming out of the pandemic, we do expect it to rebound. People want to go out to restaurants. They want to go and shop. Downtown San Jose has retail issues for different reasons than the pandemic, which is just we have 3 malls that were built about a mile outside of downtown in each direction. And that really took a lot of our major retailers out of downtown and put them into malls. And that happened, 30, 40 years ago. But in the downtown specifically, we have our first project that I mentioned we got started on. It's the conversion of a 12-screen movie theater into 70,000 square feet of office and 20,000 square feet of ground floor retail. It's right on the Paseo de San Antonio, which is kind of a major pedestrian thoroughfare. And we put our retail out onto the market about 4 months ago. And we now have the entire retail ground floor leased out. So as far as demand for retail, you can see those stronger groups wanting to expand. We signed some great tenants, some really fun, we signed a miniature golf full service bar and restaurant. We signed one of those axe throwing places. We're really close to San Jose State, and so we're going to get a lot of those students walking from campus up the Paseo, past Phil's Coffee on their way to Plaza de Cesar Chavez. They're going to stop in and maybe have a beer and throw some axes.
It is very trendy, the throwing of axes. I don't quite get it.
We work really close with San Jose State because we have a student housing high-rise project in our first fund. So we talk with their head of facilities a lot. And he said, Eric, please don't put axe throwing 2 blocks from campus. Come on.
Well, so let's talk sort of as we wrap up. Where do you see Urban Catalyst in 5 years, and where do you see San Jose, kind of the two together in 5 years?
Boy, San Jose is just poised for this massive amount of revitalization. If all of the projects that are currently in the planning process are built out, say over the next 10 years, the downtown itself should triple in size. So what I expect is right now in downtown, there's like 7 cranes in the ground. We've never experienced like that Seattle moment or the San Francisco moment where you can see 45, 50 cranes in the ground at the same time. I expect to see that in the next 5 years. Urban Catalyst, we have 9 projects in our pipeline. The smallest project is like $80 million. The largest projects are $350 million. We expect to have all 9 projects either under construction or already complete and stabilized in the downtown. So we plan on, being a part of this downtown and really a part of this wave of revitalization that's happening.
I love that. Well, Erik, thank you so much for your time today. And listeners, you can learn more at urbancatalyst.com.
Thank you.